Texas goes down 28-14 in a game that was much closer than that, in fairness, but it was yet another double-digit SEC loss in the playoff. We had 3 of those. They lost by an average of 17 points per game in the playoff, for those of you that are keeping track at home. But 3 of the last 4 games, if you go back to the Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State, 3 of the last 4 games in this college football playoff have been phenomenal games. Like, just absolute, on a 1 to 10 scale, like all 3 of those games, 9 out of 10 or better. I think Ohio State, Texas, you're probably looking at like maybe the lowest of the 3, like 9 of 10, but 9.5 or 10 of 10 for Arizona State, Texas, and then what happened in the Orange Bowl between Penn State and Notre Dame. It's been amazing for the sport. But I will also say, if you are somebody that's outside of one of these like 10 to 15 elite brands in the sport, you should also be looking around at what's happened in this playoff and say, it's pretty likely we will never see a non-blue blood champion again. Maybe to some, that's not like breaking news or anything crazy, but that probably will hit home for a decent amount of people. Big 12, ACC, even, 2/3 of the Big 10, maybe half of the SEC. We're not going to see a champion coming out of that group because of what it takes now. What's funny is I have seen some people still clinging to this idea that, or the take that, hey, this is not good. Look, we have a national championship game between a team that lost to Northern Illinois in Notre Dame and then a team that lost twice in the regular season. So that's a bad thing. People, mainly Georgia fans, have said that that's a bad thing for the sport because, it means the regular season games, John, just aren't as meaningful. If you can lose twice or you can lose a game to somebody as bad as Northern Illinois and still make the national championship game, like, why would we ever allow that? Well, did anybody think that this regular season was bad? Like, I guess I missed when the regular season was a problem because I thought this was like the most exciting and best regular season I can remember in a long time. And we were drawing comparisons to 2007, early on in the regular season. 2007, of course, being the year that everything went completely wild. And you had like Rutgers and South Florida and Kansas, all in the top 10 of the sport. It was a zany year, which is great. Like, people love that. We had a lot of that. And the other thing that we had this year was just more regular season games mattering, which flies right in the face of what the other argument is. Oh, these games don't matter as much. Well, no, we actually have larger swaths of the country interested because more of these games had college football playoff implications, right? Like Desmond Howard wanted to dump all over Arizona State and K-State being a game that you picked, but that was a game that had college football playoff implications late in the season, type of game that never would have before. So there was a lot more interest generated by the format. And these games were still meaningful, right? Like, it's not like the Northern Illinois game wasn't meaningful. Did Notre Dame not get crushed and just raked over the coals for losing that game when they did? I came on and did a show. I think that was one of the weeks that I did like a live reaction show on that Saturday. And I was like, well, this may free up a spot for the Big 12 in the playoff, right? Notre Dame's out. And I was far from the only one saying it. Look, I'm going to roast my bad takes later on in the show. Okay. For those just joining me, I've got a bad take that I want to roast myself for, but that is not one that I'm going to specifically put on me because there were plenty of others. Who joined me in that. And so they did at the time take a lot of crap for it. And they had a chance to rebound from it and still get to the national championship game, but they had to win every single other game on their schedule, and do it in fairly dominant fashion. I would give Notre Dame a lot of credit for that. Also, Ohio State, right? Like, it didn't matter that they lost 2 games. Tell everybody in Columbus, Ohio, that the Michigan game didn't matter. Like, that's still, honestly, that's one of the things that is the beauty of the sport, that the Michigan game turned into this referendum on Ryan Day and people wanted to fire him. And now the guy is a 9.5 point favorite to win the national championship in the title game. That's why college football is great, because that game still means so much that some people would almost rather have that than the national championship. That's why our sport is awesome. And it didn't change that. And then here's the real kicker. to all the Georgia fans out there. It's mainly Georgia fans that you see that are pushing this narrative that, oh, this is a bad thing for the sport, that we have a 2-loss team in the national championship game against a team that lost to Northern Illinois. First of all, we've had a 2-loss SEC national champion before. Hello, Les Miles. So to the SEC fans, you might want to chill on that just a little bit. But also, nobody in history, no matter who wins it, nobody in history will have earned a national champion more than the 2024/25 national champion of college football. Because, like, think about it. If it's going to be Ohio State will have, in the last month of their season, gone through number 7 Tennessee, number 1 Oregon, number 3 Texas, and number 5 Notre Dame to win a title. Like, are you kidding me? So back in the day, we had teams rolling through 12-0 or 11-1 to the national championship game where they're playing maybe 1 or 2 games against teams in the top 7, maybe 2. Now we've got a team that just did it 4 straight times, right? And Notre Dame would still be playing 4 in the top 12. Obviously, Indiana, some would argue whether or not they should have been up there, but they were in the playoff. They will have ripped off wins against 4 straight playoff opponents. It still is not bad, man. That still is not bad. That's a pretty good run. They've earned it more than any other champ in history. So I don't want to hear any of that argument. It's weird to me that comes up. And why can we not just enjoy this? Like, it's been great to watch these playoff games. Also, anybody from the SEC that wanted to take a dump on the selection committee, like Lane Kiffin, selection committee for the games that they put out. Have we watched the NFL playoffs? Have you seen how the wild card round of the playoffs goes? That's how the first round of a playoff typically works. You're going to have teams that should be winning by double digits in those games. It does not mean the committee did a bad job. Stuart Mandel had a fantastic tweet today. And I know you guys, I've had my issues with Mandel at times. Stuart Mandel had a great tweet where he was like, man, NFL selection committee really screwed up. They should have put the Bengals in because, like, none of these games were close. It's a great tweet. It's a great tweet. Shut up, SEC. I've got more for them later. But what this also does, that path that I just outlined, that I just told you, makes this a year where we're going to see, in my opinion, the most deserving national champion that we've ever seen. Yeah, that path is exactly what brings me to my first major point here, and that is we're never going to see another non-blue blood national champion again in this format, because that's what it takes now to win the national championship, is winning 4 straight games against top 7 teams. Maybe top 12 if you're lucky. You can extend it out to 12, and maybe you don't get 4 that are all in the top 7. But that's damn hard. And you can say, well, John, what if you get a bye? And okay, yes, well, you better get it done next year then. We better have a non-blue blood national champ next year, because if you're somebody that's not in the SEC or the Big Ten, we'll see if they get it done for next year. Maybe not even next year. My guess is next year we may still have the same format, but after that, man, 26, it is going to be a format where there will be no automatic buys for the Big 12 champ or the ACC champ. So you're going to be playing 4 games. You're going to be playing 4 games. They're going to make you start playing in the first round. So now your path will be winning 4 high-quality games like that, in which you would likely be favored in 0 of them. So the odds of that happening, as opposed to even just what happened with TCU a couple of years ago, get into the playoff, win 1 really high-level game, then you got to go play another really high-level game. I know TCU got absolutely boat raced. But if Ohio State makes a field goal at the end of the game against Georgia and maybe has some key injury, maybe you got a puncher's chance then in that game too. That's a much easier path than having to win 4 straight games like that. So what this playoff has done, it's giving more access. Technically, yes, you have better access to it if you are a non-blue blood team, but you also got further away from an actual national championship. Like, you got closer to the tournament, you got further away from the actual national championship with what has happened here. So look, I already knew that going into this. I'm just making the point. I'm accentuating this now because of what we've seen Ohio State do has been so extraordinary, especially considering how down in the dumps they were after the Michigan game. And I think it's like the perfect encapsulation of what this is. Like, the new format offers more access to non-blue bloods, but it does not offer them the Cinderella path. The Cinderella path is a big boy like Ohio State, who's probably more talented than anybody in the country, that just messed up and tripped all over themselves in the regular season and gets a second chance because of the playoff to then rip off the 4 impressive high-level games. Like, and I get it. Like, there are Big 12 fans, I'm sure, who are like screaming about this and, maybe would try to fight me on this and disagree. But like, because there have been Big 12 teams that have been close, like in our lifetimes recently. I mean, I just mentioned TCU. SEC country, I'm sure, would argue they were not close, but they were in the literal national championship game just 3 years ago. Baylor and TCU were very close in 2014. Like, those were playoff caliber teams in 2014 that kind of got screwed. And Ohio State wound up winning the national championship after they got in with the 4 seed. Maybe they had a shot. Oklahoma State, I mean, you just don't lose an overtime game in Ames to a bad Iowa State team. You're playing for the national championship in 2011. Probably should have played for it anyway. West Virginia was close in 2007. I'll just leave it at that, Mountaineer fans. I know you don't need any more reminders about that. K-State, close in 1998 and 2012. 1998 was the K-State version of West Virginia 2007. And 2012, if they just beat Baylor, they were going to play a beatable Notre Dame team for the national championship in 2012. I know that was not all that long ago, but things have changed enough in that time that I do believe it to be an accurate statement that we're not going to see a non-blue blood national champion. The other thing I would say to anybody who has a kind of knee-jerk reaction to that or a visceral reaction to that is join me in reading the list of national champions here. I was doing this earlier, and I was just like, we really don't ever have them anyway. Michigan, Georgia, Bama, LSU, Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, Florida State, Bama, Auburn, Bama. I wonder when that was. Florida, LSU, Florida, Texas, USC, LSU, USC, Ohio State, Miami, Oklahoma. Now we're back to the year 2000. Florida State, Tennessee, Michigan, Nebraska, Florida, Nebraska, Florida State, Alabama. Finally, in 1991, we get to Washington. And then in 1990, we've got Colorado and Georgia Tech. I mean, we're going all the way to a year and then 2 years after I was born to get to the point where we're saying, hey, those are some non-blue blood national champions that we had. Basically. And I'm being a little generous there. I'm including Nebraska, but at the time Nebraska was winning those titles, they were very clearly a blue blood in the sport. So I'm not sharing this to be like a Debbie Downer. This is a reality I've already reconciled with. I understand that this is the reality, but I think the way this played out in year 1 of the playoff, regardless of who wins, even Ohio State losing to Notre Dame will still make a good point with what the path was that they had to go through. But even looking at the path Ohio State's had just to get here to the national championship game, I don't know how. We have a little bit more parity these days, and the SEC has definitely fallen off from being this dominant force. That doesn't change the fact that if you're not one of these complete blue blood programs, it's damn near impossible to rip off 3 or 4 straight wins like this. I just think that's the reality of the situation. Now, you still need to playoff access is still important. I'm not saying here then, hey, just pack it all in and it doesn't, doesn't matter if you still have access to the playoff. Now, I mean, like, of course it does, because everybody wants to feel like they're included, feel like they have a chance. And just from a recruiting standpoint, you have to have playoff access, or we're talking about totally different things. Because even if a kid, first of all, you're not going to tell the kid, hey, we can't win 4 in a row like that. But a kid wants to be able to have the opportunity to be Cam Scatterbo, right? Cam Scatterbo blows up with his performance in the college football playoff, becomes a household name in college football because of that. You still need to protect that opportunity here in the situation that we're in. But I can also understand if you look at this and say, well, just throw up your hands and like, all right, let them go do their thing. Eventually we'll create some other kind of second tier playoff system. Maybe that happens at some point. For now, I would still prefer to have the performances like Scadaboo and have a chance to have big moments like that. That may be the peak for everybody except the top 10 to 15 teams in college football. And that may not be, as I just read you, all those national champions that much different than it was before. But I think you are even further away than you were. And Ohio State certainly serves as proof of that.